Dear colleagues and friends, welcome to the new edition of our webinar series. This time our focus is our science editing skills, and we hope that knowledge gained during today's meeting will help you to produce influential articles and target the best journals. This webinar is organized by Danilo Halitsky Lviv National Medical University, Ukrainian Council of Science Editors, and Shevchenko Scientific Society. And it's a big pleasure to introduce our today's speaker, Dr. Armand Gasparian, our regular lecturer and supporter of our webinar series. Dr. Armand is an editor of several influential medical journals and also a reviewer of Scopus database. And he prepared for us a new lectures. And he is going to generously share with us his rich editors and authors' experience. Before we get started, I would like to ask the president of Ukrainian Council of Science Editors, Professor Stoyko, to say a few introductory words. Please, Professor Stoyko.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm happy to see everybody is healthy, because in today's situation, it's not so easy to stay healthy. At least in my department, 50% of my young collaborators are sick with COVID. After being sick half a year, then 2 vaccinations, and now for the second time. That's strange, and I'm pretty sure new ideas in the study of this bad virus pathology, etiology will help to solve these many problems. But back to our meeting, I consider that this collaboration is very important from 2 points of view. Number one, it's interdisciplinary one. We have institutes of basic science, research institute of Academy of Science, of Ministry of Health of Ukraine, and we have medical universities also, representatives from this university participating. So this collaboration of basic scientists and applied scientists should be helpful. And secondly, we are trying, especially on the initiative of Professor Gasparian, to support the organization issues. It's mean moving our journals to a higher level of evaluation. Then the papers published in these journals will be better estimated, and the scientists from Ukraine will be more acknowledged. So in that way, we are working as a team to improve, to help one another. So let me finish with these words. Let's collaborate, let's be healthy, and let's do our work as good as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Stoyko. And just a few housekeeping questions. Today's webinar is being recorded, so we will be able to share with you a link. And also we invite your comments and questions. You can type them into the chat box on your Zoom panel, or you can ask these questions directly after every presentation. Please welcome our speaker, Armand Gasparian. Dr. Armand, you can share with us your screen.
Olena, please allow me to share my screen.
Yes, you can.
Okay, good. Okay. You can see my screen. Yeah.
Yes.
So there is no any problem with connection. So streaming is okay.
Yes.
Hopefully throughout the webinar we'll have the same speed of internet speed, so without any interruption. So thank you to all our participants today for joining. Some joined, registered and joined at the very last minute. My special thanks to Professor Stoica, who is quite busy with his research and his regular work at the department, but he has managed to join us today and shared his positive thoughts about Ukrainian Council of Science Editors. It's great. So, Olena, is everything is fine with my video?
Yes, everything is fine.
Okay. So Professor Stoica shared his aims of Ukrainian Council of Science Editors. He himself is a scientist with international recognition and ethical stance. So I'm sure that all member journals will be also carefully selected, listed on the website of Ukrainian Council of Science Editors, and will be also supported by our experts in their efforts to join Scopus, Web of Science Databases, Medline, and PubMed Central, and many other specialist databases. So before we start discussing professional topics of today's saturated program, we should acknowledge support of all peer reviewers, particularly those who are ongoing research fellows and spare their time, donate time on reviewing for index journals. So it's huge amount of work. Reviewer academic accomplishments are credited on Publon's platform and should be considered as an academic work by university administration and those who credit and promote academics. So peer review activities is now considered as publication activity because all peer reviewers contribute to the quality and visibility of published contents. So there are several associations concerned with peer review integrity, and some of these associations included points on peer review in their recommendations, particularly International Committee of Medical Journal Editors. Most of today's participants are medics, and most of them regularly read and consult recommendations of International Committee of Medical Journal Editors. These recommendations are of great importance to research managers, to PhD candidates, and editors. You can see that Ukrainian Council of Science Editors, startup association or organization with ambitious aims, also concerned with peer review, and all member journals joining Ukrainian Council of Science Editors should also prove that they adhere to best practice in peer review. Without adhering to these best practice in peer review points, joining Scopus, Web of Science, Medline, and other databases is impossible. Committee on Publication Ethics has 10 points merged in one document called Core Practices, and point number 9 tells us that peer review process should be transparent, which means that transparency relates to instructions for authors, relates to Publon's crediting. So reviewers are asked to forward to Publon's their reviewer official acknowledgements generated by journals, and journals may also increase transparency by regularly publicizing lists of reviewers. But before publicizing reviewer lists, editors should ask permission of their reviewers to include their names in the acknowledgement list. It's also an ethical requirement. International Committee of Medical Journal Editors regularly updates its recommendations, and the last update took place last month, December 2021, and points related to peer review are important points for enforcing by ethical journals. So peer reviewers are currently considered as academics or experts in their field who should be incentivized academically and should be provided credits. So reviewers need credits, academic credits. And it's considered, peer review process is considered by all leading journal editors, particularly medical editors, as continuation of academic work. And also there are some points related to peer review. Peer review is moderated by editor-in-chief and handling editors. Reviewers provide their comments, recommendations, but final decision, final recommendations to accept or reject lies with editor-in-chief or handling editors. Peer reviewers are usually experts in their narrow field of interest. Sometimes in general medical journals, editors invite reviewers to evaluate works which are not closely related to their narrow field of interest. However, skilled reviewers may perform evaluation based on their knowledge. So it's great to evaluate manuscripts in allied fields, not just in their narrow fields. However, there are some fields like rheumatology, like cardiology, narrow specialized fields where reviewers wish to evaluate only closely related topics. Let's say disease, only manuscripts dealing with ischemic heart disease, or manuscripts dealing with rheumatoid arthritis, no any other disease. So these type of issues should be considered by editors, and editors should also have close circle of reviewers who can be trusted on, who can be who can evaluate works considered by editors as valuable and related to reviewer narrow and broad interests. So everything depends on close cooperation between editor, handling editor, and reviewer. So we should consider reviewers as experts. So not all ongoing research fellows can be considered as experts. And it's not good practice to invite ongoing research fellows to evaluate everything. Ongoing research fellows should have their close interest in certain fields, let's say in clinical rheumatology, or let's say in cell biology, or let's say in heart physiology, and should focus on their narrow field of interest. It may help to produce better quality reviewer comments. So all these are ethical points. So at some if you see an invitation, let's say when cardiologists receive invitation from a toxicology or theoretical journal, they may decline invitation. predatory journals usually send invitations. Let's say technology journal sends invitation to clinicians, or clinical journals send invitations to reviewers who are not interested at all in the journal and related manuscripts. So these type of issues relate to ethical stance of journals. Journal editors should always promote their good reviewers. Promotion or incentives may relate to academic promotion, certificates of excellence, and they also reviewers should be instructed to properly forward reviewer acknowledgements to Publons to get deserved credits. Publon's platform is considered as a global platform at the moment, the only credited platform for reviewers, and this platform can be used for academic promotion as well, academic promotion of reviewers. All journals should have publication ethics and publication malpractice statement, and these statements are updated regularly, particularly immediately before submission journal application to Scopus, Web of Science, and other databases. And in these publication ethics statements, editors should clearly, point by point, present reviewer responsibilities. There are responsibilities of authors, reviewers, editors, and publishers. All these points should be filled. And with regard to reviewer responsibilities, reviewers should know what can be done and what cannot be done by reviewers. So confidentiality is important, professional stance, disclosure of conflicts of interest, but disclosure of conflict of interest and professional evaluation, evaluation based on available evidence, not just a priori statements without evidence. And if reviewers perform evaluation, it should be done within shortest possible time, because authors expect quick, professional, and courteous or comments worded in good English, in pleasing English, without any personal insults, without any personal comments. To increase visibility of reviewers' works, all reviewers need ORCID identifiers. Open research and contributor IDs are essential for increasing visibility of journals, and registries like Directory of Open Access Journals, DOAJ, prioritizes open access tools, open access or digital identifiers like digital object identifier. The same refers to ORCID. Without ORCID identifiers of reviewers, it would be much more difficult to increase visibility of their reviewer accomplishments, because some journals, like BMJ Group journals, refuse to integrate with Publons, and they simply present or transfer information about reviewer accomplishments on reviewers' ORCID platform. So ORCID identifiers of reviewers are important digital tools for increasing visibility of their works, and also visibility of journal or transparency of peer review. Just few examples of journals with Scopus indexing status. You can see that this particular journal in endocrine problems in endocrine pathology joined Scopus, and they submitted in their application link to their publication ethics and publication malpractice statement. And the first point of their statements refers to guidance from Committee on Publication Ethics, what reviewers are allowed to do, or their reviewer responsibilities. Another good journal with Scopus indexing status and quite well digitized journal with cross-ref membership and adherence to best practice standards. You can see that editorial board members allowed to display their ORCID identifiers. So it's another example of good journal adhering to best practice, adhering to recommendations of several editorial associations, including Committee on Publication Ethics. So this type of journals increase visibility of their work and increase transparency of peer review. Who are best reviewers? Best reviewers are considered those who are active researchers with active publication activity, those who are good at statistics, those who performed, who acted as reviewers for several journals, preferably index journals, good journals, so they know how good journals, ethical journals operate and how handling editors take into account reviewer comments. Sometimes editors allow reviewers to list names of preferable reviewers. However, we as editors should be very careful with author-suggested names because most of these names are biased reviewers, friends of reviewers, and their reviewer accomplishments can be biased, and sometimes these reviewers can be also manipulated by authors themselves. So try to be very careful with author-suggested reviewers. Also, pay attention, editors pay attention to reviewer lists and pick reviewer names from articles cited by authors. So this is why we often, as editors, advise authors to update their references and include the most recent articles, replaced outdated articles with new ones, with better digitization, global visibility, and hopefully also better evidence. So these type of references are picked by editors and considered for inviting reviewers, potential reviewers. Elements of successful reviews. Usually, best reviewers perform, act swiftly within shortest possible time, accept reviewer invitation within few hours, and submit their reviewer comments within 7-25 days. Why 7? Because most open access journals currently consider 1 week is as enough term for performing reviewer task. So good journals, those who move towards open access, also shorten peer review turnaround times. So local journals, Eastern European journals may also increase turnaround times, shorten peer review term, and increase quality of their reviewer accomplishments. Confidentiality is the most important point. So reviewers should keep all points, all ideas discussed throughout the peer review confidential and should not benefit from abusing the peer review system and using inappropriately ideas discussed throughout the peer review. So it can be also considered as plagiarism of ideas if reviewers reuse ideas and use these ideas picked from peer review for their own purposes, for publication of their own articles. Reviewers should provide comments based on evidence base based on articles retrieved from global databases, Scopus, Web of Science, Medline, and they may also consider equator network standards to improve, to ask authors to adhere to relevant equator network standards, STROP standard for observational works, Cherries for online surveys, CARE for case reports, etc., etc. So I and Olena published guidelines, recommendations on peer review, and these recommendations can be also enforced by local Eastern European journals, struggling with quality, transparency of peer review. Some of these points are presented here. So when reviewers are invited to evaluate manuscripts, they should provide short, understandable, clear points. And their reviewer comments should be structured along these lines: introduction, evaluation of the title, abstract, keywords, major comments about modifiable points, what can be done, which points can be modified, which points can be improved, or how statistics can be revised to improve quality of articles. And major comments should be followed by minor comments related to language editing, related to references, and when reviewers suggest auto-citations, suggest to cite their own articles, they should be very careful, because if they unmask their identity, it's not good. If they overly cite their articles in reviewer comments, it's also unethical. And if they push these references, ask authors to revise their manuscripts and include unnecessary references, irrelevant references, it can be also considered as unethical. So good editor, good handling editor, always edit this type of comments and omit references which can be considered as auto-citations, reviewer auto-citations. And in concluding remarks, reviewer expresses positive or negative attitude towards manuscript. So it's better to provide negative comment, to frankly ask authors that their manuscript is not publishable in any form or at this form without major revisions. So these type of comments are well regarded because these are frank comments from reviewers. There are different models of peer review. Most local journals, small journals, operate double-blind peer review when identity of reviewers and authors masked, and editors avoid biases related to reviewer and author points. One of the new form of peer review is open peer review or post-publication peer review on platforms such as Twitter, such as Publons, and other social networking platforms such as ResearchGate. So reviewers or any reader may submit his or her comments post-publication on Publon's platform, and these type of comments are valued high by altmetric.com. So post-publication peer review by specialists, by readers of published articles also contributes a lot to altmetric attention scores, AAS. How editors pick reviewers? They pay attention to Publon's lists, pick from Scopus database, after searches through PubMed, so global databases, reputable databases considered as platforms for searches of good reviewers, those with recent publication activity. Recent means within 2-3 years. So, and editors should know about this strategy. I understand that not all local or Eastern European reviewers have publication activity, recent publication activity. So it's up to handling editors to pick local reviewers without publication activity visible on global databases. However, they take also extra responsibility to carefully edit their local reviewer comments. Sometimes it is necessary to involve statistical editor or reviewer. These experts increase quality of original research publications. So I also often suggest local local journals, peer-reviewed journals, to have statistical editor, 1 or 2 or even more statistical editors, depending on number of submitted articles. So statistical reviewers may request primary data, may ask authors to provide primary data, and they themselves, statisticians, may rerun statistical analysis and ask authors to update or change something in their statistical data reporting. Reviewers of good journals are always supported by access to Scopus, Web of Science, and other databases at the time of peer review. It may help to increase evidence-based comments by reviewers and may also help to increase, to pick relevant references when some of these references are missed by authors. But of course, the separate thing is auto citations and citation stacking by reviewers, pushing citations which are irrelevant, unmask review identity, etc., etc. So here is an example of supporting reviewers during peer review by providing access for searches to Web of Science, PubMed, and other platforms. And authors, reviewers should be also provided by structured form of peer review to minimize time spent on peer review. There should be mandatory fields like window for comments transferable to authors and editors, and not mandatory fields like comments for editors. There is no need to always fill non-mandatory fields, particularly by busy reviewers, clinicians, reviewers. So quality of peer review affects chances of consecutive manuscript submissions. So editors should care about quality, courtesy of their reviewer comments. If reviewers show superiority, show their ambitions, and simply push authors, it's unacceptable by most editors, and they simply may ignore editors, good editors may ignore this type of reviewer comments. So we always pay attention to conflicts of interest, to professional stance, which is obvious in reviewer comments, and also evidence supportive for reviewer comments. So quality of reviewer comments relates to prestige of target journal. Reviewer credits. So we discuss a lot these reviewer comments, reviewer credits, and we ask university and research institutions to consider reviewer credits as valuable points for academics promotion. Fortunately, now we have Publons, which is the best and globally acceptable platform for for crediting reviewers and displaying their reviewer credentials. Most of the time, good reviewers are picked by searches through Publon's platform. And this platform was once credited by Nature, and you know that Nature is the top scientific journal. Any article published by Nature immediately increases prestige of a topic or an article or even an individual author. Good journals discuss with reviewers whether they wish to publicize their accomplishments, and some partnering journals, partnering with Publons, may automatically transfer information to Publon's platform without asking reviewers to forward official reviewer acknowledgement. So these type of things are acceptable for well-funded journals, because partnership with Publons is for some certain amount of money. So if we use Publons as a crediting platform, we may perform searches related to countries, related to disciplines, and today we are discussing local Ukrainian fellows. There are a number of reviewers, potential reviewers registered with Publon's platforms, and most of them perform for index journals. So Publon's platform is for prestigious, ethical, and good journals. No any predatory journal is allowed to join this platform, and all these predatory journals are considered as outsiders by Publon's platform. So reviewers, good reviewers who review for predatory journals or substandard journals, they first of all, they should refuse to review. But if they unknowingly reviewed for this journal, they should clean their platform, their profiles, and exclude any information on predatory journals on their Publon's profile. So you can see here, top 10 reviewers from Ukraine. Most of them are awarded for their prolific review activities, and most of them reviewed several hundred times, up to 1,000 times. It's good. It's a huge amount of time donated to index journals. So we may also consider those who reviewed and received awards. Unfortunately, you can see that the number of awardees from Ukraine is just 13, whereas number of registered potential reviewers is more than 42,000. So we may also consider some top reviewers, and you can see like this lady, ongoing researcher with numerous review accomplishments for excellent journals with prestigious, published by prestigious big publishers. And this type of review accomplishments also helpful for increasing scientific prestige of a department, city, country. And here you can see also that this lady also contributed to post-publication review on Publon's platform. That's also possible. So it's also a culture of social media activity, which is well valued by altmetric.com, and which is considered as the main global social media aggregator. Good journals also have solid profile on Publon's platform, and you can see Shevchenko Scientific Society Journal proceedings with numerous supporters, numerous experts who endorse this journal, and quite a large number of review accomplishments. Another good journal with online profile, unfortunately, number of review accomplishments by this journal is not high, And it's not because of editors' inactivity, but because of unawareness of reviewers who review for this journal and never forward official review accomplishments to publish. So these type of issues are important for journals applying to Web of Science, because Publons is now a part of Web of Science group. So journal applications without review accomplishments or with low review accomplishments are immediately visible by Web of Science evaluators. So try to increase your review activities credited by Publons to impress Web of Science evaluators and to get indexed by Web of Science. In Ukraine, we have a number of good institutions, large institutions, and you can see here several top 10 universities with huge, with a large number of verified review accomplishments, like Polytechnic University in Lviv, included in QS University rankings, and the number of verified review accomplishments is quite impressive. But COVID-19 pandemic changed a lot, and we see inactivity of most reviewers in the last 12 months, last year. However, we can see that some good journals still hold their top positions on Publons because they understand the importance of reviewer credits. So when we evaluate Western and Eastern universities within one country, we see that Western universities, those meeting EU standards or those who wish to be considered as European universities, increase transparency of their review accomplishments and invest more in increasing science editing skills of their reviewers and increasing understanding, awareness of the importance of Publons credits. So, and finally, about about universities which are supportive of this review, of these webinar initiatives, like Danila Halitsky Lviv National Medical University, Bohomolets National Medical University in Kyiv, and Ivano-Frankivsk National Medical University. You can see that all these universities have a large number of reviewers, and their stance is also closer to top universities, number 4, number 3, and number 7. So this trend should be nurtured, and good universities, the universities who wish to be ranked high among other world universities, should increase visibility of their review accomplishments. And finally, about Directory of Open Access Journals, where reviewers, peer review statistics is closely watched, closely evaluated. So without quality peer review, without established peer review, journals cannot be considered as candidates for DOAJ indexing. The same refers to Scopus indexing and many other indexing services. An example of a good journal from Ukraine, you can see that they disclose information about submission and acceptance dates. These two dates are essential, are needed to understand peer review turnaround times. The journals refusing to publicize acceptance dates, both dates, submission and acceptance dates, conceal information about peer review and cannot be considered as transparent in view of their peer review processes. And any journal who wish to meet high standards should decrease turnaround times and increase number of peer reviewers. Any comments at this point?
Dear Armand, Thank you very much for your excellent presentation, very useful presentation.
Thank you.
I have one comment and question. Being a reviewer have many benefits, but for me, the most important are two benefits. The first one, being a good reviewer is the best way to become a good author. Why? By improving your own writing skills, by spotting common mistakes. And I believe that early career researcher should use every opportunity to serve as a peer reviewer and review manuscripts as much as possible. And the second benefits is keeping up with the latest researchers in your field. However, the question is how can early career researcher, young specialist, how can he or her become a reviewer? Because mostly editors of index journals are looking for experienced reviewer. The question to you, how can a young specialist to become a reviewer?
So it's not an easy task. First, ongoing researchers should publish good article and should be listed as corresponding authors or as authors with a publicized email, because editors always pick first or last authors in author bylines. And ongoing researchers should target good journals from the beginning of their career instead of targeting small, poorly visible journals. So my advice to participants, for today's participants, to publish in index journals and try to become corresponding authors, telling potential readers and editors that they may take responsibility as reviewers. They understand the whole peer review process, do's and don'ts, and understand their responsibilities.
Yes, and there are some we have question from Professor Stoiko.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm getting approximately 10 up to 20 invitations for reviewing. So if I accept all of them, I will do nothing but be a reviewer. Of course, I am refusing, okay, 80%, not 80, but 75% because it's impossible. Mostly I'm refusing with a announcement that I am not an expert in that field. But anyway, my question is another one. Not very often, but sometimes when we submit a paper in 2-3 days, we receive a letter or announcement from the editor that we have so many articles submitted that we cannot accept your, because there are too many. And this is a decision of the editor, not of the reviewers. So do you consider this practice is good? I consider it's bad one.
Okay, Professor Stoiko, thank you. I understand that you often submit your manuscripts to journals like Nature, Science, Cell, and this type of journals, of course, they may,
not so high.
Okay, or in your narrow field, yeah, to top journals, yeah, and I understand. And it's okay to reject outright without sending to external reviewers, because chances of publication by Nature, Science are slim. So it's okay, and it's good service to authors.
1 to 5%, not slim.
Yeah, okay, even 1%. Yeah, you are right. and it's good service to authors when editor-in-chief rejects outright without sending to peer reviewers, because he or she understands that these type of articles, publication chances are too low. However, if medium or if local journals reject outright without explanation, without plagiarism checks, without explaining that a manuscript is not within their scope of interest, it's bad editorial practice. So there should be balance. And we, as editors and supporters of Ukrainian Council of Science Editors, should also try to set recommendations for local journals to help editors act without any pushes, without any harassment by reviewers, by authors. So there should be set of requirements or recommendations how local editors and reviewers should act, because circumstances in Eastern Europe and Ukraine are different. So I think there should be balance, and outright rejection is also a valid option. Why not?
But continuation of this question, very often there are 3 reviewers now in many journals. So sometimes 2 reviewers have reject, and 1 reviewer has major or minimal revision, and the editor says, okay, you can improve your article, and then submit it in a month or 2. And in another case, it's opposite. 1 is negative and 2 are so-so, and the editor say, okay, sorry, he rejects, so bye-bye.
I understand your point, yeah. So final...
It's subjective, it's very subjective.
The whole peer review is subjective, and there are many biases in this process, but decision always lies with editor-in-chief. He or she takes final responsibility, and it is better to reject more rather than accept more. If you continue accepting more and more Chinese articles, you may end up accepting a lot of articles generated by computers, or a lot of articles without ethical stance, without ethics approvals. So it's better to reject more rather than accept more for good journals.
And the final question, not a question, but
comment.
Remark. Maybe half a year I was reviewing manuscript for the journal with impact factor of 10.5. I will not say which one, but anyway. And I put major revision, and because I was really conscious about the biological part, because it was a biological and chemical part, and say, okay, biology is for nothing, chemistry is responsibility of other people. But the guy, not the guy, but the team has maybe 3 papers in this journal published earlier. And finally, I found that the article was accepted, although the biological part was very criticized by myself. So again,
yeah, it's biased process, and I understand. If authors publish with the journal, reputation of these authors increase, and editor should respect gold, so-called gold authors, and may consider accepting not so strong article, not so strong manuscript, just relying on prestige and previous contributions of authors. That's golden rule of editors, and I also accept that point. We also have gold reviewers who often, today we have some participants who are gold reviewers, particularly from Turkey. So these gold reviewers also have prestige, and any submission from their team should be also evaluated as a priority manuscript. So we should prioritize submissions and make decisions as editors based on priority principles. So I understand that there is some subjectivity in this process. However, the whole process of publishing is also subjective.
And finally, it's not a question, but just a remark. So many journals are fighting for these reviewers, and they propose discounts for publication fee. So I have it's approximately $100 to $200 a discount in a future publication. So usually it's approximately 2,000, and if you have, let's say, 4 or 5 reviewers, you can have 50% discount for future publication.
Okay, Professor Stoica, I am not a guy supporting these discount system. Yeah, because it's a business and it's not useful for local and Eastern European journals.
No.
Journals like Croatian Medical Journal is a model for all European small journals, platinum open access. Journals like Nature and other, they charge a lot for open access fees, more than $10,000. But all authors of Nature are rich authors, funded abundantly, and they have, for each article, they have at least $10,000 considered for open access fees. I know that in Bulgaria, there is also system in place to secure around $2,000 for open access charges. And it's also okay. In Ukraine, there is no such policy, but you should also consider it, or your sponsors should also provide funding. Research grants should also include some percentage, let's say 10–20% of funding should go to open access fees, particularly for good journals or hybrid journals like Springer Nature, Elsevier, and other published journals.
I will say, just final comment, these are cells, polymers, cancer, and other journals of this series. So for I have for one review $100–200 discount as a reviewer.
Yeah, excellent. But still, it's not good for ongoing research fellows. They need to publish in platinum open access journals and should target these journals and should avoid submitting anything to Nature, Cell, or other top scientific journals.
Thank you for this
discussion.
You.
Thanks a lot. Just follow us, stay with us.
Okay.
Olena?
Let's move on to the next item of today's meeting. Also very important, about citations, references. Please share with us your screen with your presentation. Yes, we can see. Oh, well, everything is okay.
Everything is fine. Good. So we discussed peer review points. Hopefully all our participants will act as reviewers at some point, and they will also act as reviewers of journals like Annals of Rheumatic Diseases, Arthritis and Rheumatism, Journal of American College of Cardiology, or Cell, Cancer, Science, Nature, etc., etc. Any reviewer contribution to these journals increase rank of a reviewer and should be also considered as a major promotion point. Now, reviews, all articles may benefit a lot from properly evaluated and carefully chosen references. Any reference to an article increases visibility of the article and the journal. So we consider several points related to visibility of citations. Some editorial associations are concerned with the integrity of citing and referencing. I here added Retraction Watch blog. This blog has more than 70,000 followers, and it's US-based blog by Ivan Oransky, blogger who analyzes all rejections, and some of these rejections contain auto citations, irrelevant, just to increase, to boost own profile or to boost journal profile. So there are organizations or watchdogs closely following, closely monitoring citation patterns across journals. So be sure, you all should know that all citations and references should be relevant. International Committee of Medical Journal Editors has its own recommendations, and these recommendations prohibit using citations and references for boosting own profile. They also introduced new points related to preprints. If you wish to cite a preprint, make sure that the same preprint was not published as an article. It's better to cite article rather than preprint. If that preprint is available online for 1 or 2 years without any journal publication, it means that there is essentially something wrong with that preprint. And it's better to replace that preprint reference with another relevant, more evidence-based and peer-reviewed article. So be very careful when you cite online sources with non-peer-reviewed sources such as preprints. And avoid citing predatory journals or substandard journals. Good authors know what does it mean. So there are some preprint archives like medRxiv, sourcearchive, bioRxiv. These preprint servers publicize works prior to their peer-reviewed publications, and some of these preprints, of course, serve their purpose, increase dissemination of innovative research, and in the era of COVID-19 pandemic, some of these preprint servers, particularly medRxiv, helped to increase knowledge about COVID-19 research. So, and one of our contributors, our good fellows, like Durga Mishra from India, one of the leading Indian rheumatologists and editors who analyzed in his latest editorial the importance of preprint servers. He mentioned that it's better to cite peer-reviewed journal articles rather than preprints. When authors publish preprint first and then peer-reviewed article, they should include a link to previous preprint server, previous preprint publication, to avoid double citations or to avoid confusion in the system of evidence-based synthesis. So we are going to discuss bibliography, and there are two important mesh keywords. We often operate with medical subject headings keywords. So databases are organized platforms where individual articles with references are collected, like in Scopus. In Scopus, we have Scopus index journals where all references are processed one by one. But in Scopus, there are also Medline-only index journals, and these journals are automatically covered by Scopus without considering their reference lists. So there should be difference, and authors should also, editors of Medline index journals should also submit their applications separately to Scopus. So bibliographic databases, there are different bibliographic databases. Some are considered as abstract databases like Medline or Medline visible on PubMed platform. But there are Scopus and Web of Science databases, which are abstract and citation databases, where references of articles are processed and citations to these articles are also processed. So we call these databases abstract and citation databases. Scopus is the best and largest example. So bibliographies are also considered as a separate topic. Bibliographies as topic, as a mesh keyword, structured keyword. And this keyword relates to analysis of references, citations, citation patterns, etc., etc. The role of citations in 1992 was quite different compared to nowadays. Initially, citations were used to credit original works, to help readers understand methodology, how methods were organized, which old and new methods were used, and also references, citation to individual articles help to locate individual articles. In 1992, it was quite difficult to locate, to find individual articles because of the lack of digital identifiers. Nowadays, we have DOI, digital identifiers, and this is why it is advisable to have most references in reference lists linked to their digital object identifiers. It may increase visibility of references. Nowadays, we have a range of tasks, a range of options to deal with citations. So you probably know that QS University, World University Rankings takes into account Scopus indexed articles and citations. Citations influence impact indicators. We may analyze references into articles and may also evaluate, may also detect plagiarism if both articles rely or cite the same sources. Even if text is paraphrased, but the same references, suspicions may arise related to plagiarism or similarity or article redundancy, not necessarily plagiarism. So there are two different styles of referencing. Vancouver style, which is acceptable for most medical journals, and Harvard style, acceptable to sociologists, psychologists, and to fields where author of articles is more important than year of publication or journal of publication. And also in sociology, psychology, primary research is often published in monographs, in handbooks, textbooks. So, and it's worth citing authors along with year of publication of monographs, collection of other works, or original research works. So there is difference between Vancouver and Harvard styles of referencing, and not all journals, medical journals, accept both. Medical journals or journals adhering to International Committee of Medical Journal Editors recommendations, they endorse and enforce Vancouver style of referencing. It's a tricky thing to cite web resources. So when you cite web resources, URL resources, make sure that these resources are long-lived, prestigious, and they will not disappear in few months or 1 year. So try to cite prestigious online resources. And researchers who cite ministry data or statistical data of their ministries, they should also carefully locate URL page, and make sure that their local page will be long-lived, will not disappear in 1 or 2 years. So here is an example of citing Vancouver style. And in one sentence, you see that there are 2 references immediately after structured keywords, like here. And this means that this type of citing is more accurate and help reader to understand which part of sentence relate to which reference. Vancouver style is used by medical journals, and in Vancouver style, you may cite several references in order of using them in chronological order. However, sometimes authors cite several references or multiple references to the same fact. In that case, they should list these references in chronological order, 2003, 5, and 7. So to avoid confusion and to help readers understand or choose the newest reference for reading or for evaluation. Editorial recommendations for citing are presented by big publishers, and the main point here is to cite primary research rather than secondary research, secondary articles. So try original research articles rather than review articles. And if you're going to cite an article, please read these articles, understand main points, and then only cite these articles. We sometimes recommend reference managers. Why we need reference managers, particularly Zotero, which is free of charge reference manager, or Mendeley, free of charge reference manager and social networking platform. So these platforms are used by researchers who work on systematic reviews, who process thousands of literature sources, and they need individual libraries. PhD candidates may also have their individual libraries, online libraries presented on Zotero and Mendeley, and for that they need to understand how these reference managers works and how they help to save time on reference formatting, particularly when they submit rejected articles to several journals, received rejection and submit to another journal. So coming to different citation patterns in national scientific communities, usually small or non-Anglophone scientific communities cite their local resources when they submit articles to local journals. But when they submit to international journals or journals abroad, they tend to ignore local citations. So these are 2 extremes. Good authors always balance and always consider relevant articles, even local articles, when they submit their good manuscripts to top scientific journals. We often use different style guides, like American Psychological Association style guide or American Medical Association style guide. Any journal editor should draft his or her own style guide to avoid mixture of styles in the same journal. So if you stick to APA style, all articles should be formatted, should be in line with recommendations of these style guide. Let's say Council of Science Editors has endorsed Chicago style guide, quite different, related to American format, but they publish mostly, they deal mostly with American journals, so it's acceptable to most American journals, US-based journals, whereas most European or EU journals may choose APA style. Council of Science Editors has some set of guidelines on unethical or unacceptable citations. And there is one citation pattern called coercion, when journal editors push authors to cite the most preferable citations, ignoring relevance. That's unacceptable, and reviewers, authors should resist these unethical practices. There was also one retraction. There are many retractions because of several reasons, and including citation stacking, citation manipulations. But one journal, there was information about a journal, prestigious journal, Oxford, published by Oxford University Press, that retracted 10 articles by a Chinese author who abundantly cited his own articles. So 10 retractions took place, and the same publisher published the same 10 articles after omitting all unnecessary self-citations. So please make sure that your articles are free of irrelevant, unethical, or artificial citations, or reference lists are properly validated, and editors should also keep a close eye on these references. Some reference lists, particularly in some countries, I'm not going to name these countries, but some participants of these countries are present today. They often cite top scientific articles in their reference lists, ignoring low or medium rank journals, ignoring relevance, ignoring the main principle of searches. Searches should be comprehensive, unbiased, and not stick to impact indicators. Sometimes good quality articles are published by medium or low rank journals. So authors should also diversify list of their references and should include various sources. However, if editor evaluates reference lists and most of these references are to top scientific journals, editor may suggest to diversify and include sources to other journals, references to other sources. And this principle is in line with San Francisco Declaration on Research Assessment, DORA declaration. DORA is declaration telling us to move away from impact indicators, move away from obsession with two-year impact factor. Some good journals, particularly expert opinion series, have reference validation. So they carefully validate, consider each reference, and even mark these references in view of their importance for particular article. Some journals guide authors or readers how to cite their article. So they present acceptable journal abbreviation and help authors, future authors, to pick their articles and cite in other articles. We are gradually moving to open access, and not all journals meet open access requirements. Some are still subscription journals, but even subscription journals may join open access initiative by publishing in a hybrid mode and opening access to references. The best example is, of course, Springer Nature, where all articles, even subscription articles, are presented, displayed on the platform of the publisher or Springer link with open links, open access to reference lists. Evaluation of this reference list also may help readers to understand main points and then request access to full text. All journal editors participating today may consider, or their publishers may consider, joining Initiative for Open Citations. What does it mean? It means that all reference lists are properly evaluated, all references are well structured, contain author names, titles, correct abbreviations of journals, and accurate final parts of bibliographic information. Also, these references, individual references, are separable, machine readable, and open, accessible to public. Any reader may access any reference and may even navigate to primary link, URL link. So open initiative for open citations is important, particularly for journals who wish to join directory of open access journals, Deutsch. Citation alerts is good strategy, and I know that some big publishers also use it to increase visibility of their journals. Springer Nature, Elsevier, Korean Academy of Medical Sciences also uses the same tactics. And finally, few points about citations used for drafting citation classics articles or bibliometric analysis articles. For that, we need to understand design of cross-sectional observations, choose abstract and citation database such as Scopus and Web of Science, not Google Scholar, rank articles in view of their citations, top 100 or top 50, depends on topic, priority of research topic, and estimate range of citations, minimum and maximum. This range is not normally distributed parameter. They may also analyze, authors may analyze topics, sources, authors, countries, and affiliations. We often practice with Scopus searches and analyze collection of articles, and these collections may also form basis of citation classics articles. But there is one point related to bibliometric analysis. Avoid considering impact indicators of journals and avoid analyzing H indexes of authors of analyzed journals, because it's against DORA declaration, San Francisco Declaration on Research Assessment. So here are examples of bibliometric analysis. Some of these analyses relate to COVID-19 and may help map COVID-19 topic. And finally, you probably know this slide, it's about recommended and not recommended citations. We strongly recommend to cite ethical articles widely visible with the digital object identifier. And we strongly discourage you to cite retracted articles, provided retracted articles, poor quality articles, poorly visible articles lacking digital object identifiers, or articles which are not retrieved through prestigious global databases such as Scopus, Medline, Web of Science, etc. Over to you. So any questions you can ask on chat box?
Yes, thank you, Armand. We are waiting questions, comments from our participants.
Can I give a comment?
Yes, please.
So Actually, I have a question. So in
Bogdana, you can start your video if you want.
maybe later because I'm
Okay,
on
okay.
my way, so I'm on the street, so it would not be so perfect. So actually, the Scopus journals, they encourage the authors, to cite just that references which are widely visible. But for example, for this journals who just want to be indexed in Scopus, one of the index that they are the good journals is the citation of the journals that are already in Scopus. So it's like the vicious cycle. If some author wants to cite the article in poorly visible journal, but this journal actually published the normal articles, the quality articles, but it's still not in Scopus. It's really a high complication to do this. So it's like double standards. We cannot cite non-Scopus articles, and then the journals that are not in Scopus cannot join Scopus because they are not cited by journals from Scopus.
Okay, good point. Though I do not agree that there are double standards. The main requirement is to cite relevant articles. So whether these articles are visible or not, it's second point. But there is also another important point. We often recommend to perform searches through Scopus, Web of Science, and PubMed, and include in references mostly source articles from widely visible Scopus indexed sources. So if you wish to cite local or Ukrainian article, this article should be with digital object identifier, should be properly, bibliographic information should be properly processed, edited, and included. And the number of this type of references should be limited. Now, Scopus now consider quality of references in view of their visibility, which means that journal should be member of Crossref with all scholarly articles tagged with digital object identifiers, and there is no any requirement to have only Scopus indexed articles in reference lists. There is no such criterion. So the most important thing is to perform searches through reputable bibliographic databases and to have widely visible sources with tagged with digital object identifier. You have Open Ukrainian Citation Index, and it's also the largest database of not just Ukrainian, but also global fully digitized sources. So any researcher can use Open Ukrainian Citation Index, perform searches, and cite these type of articles with digital object identifiers. So I am sure seasoned authors know how to deal with quality references and avoid problems with indexing their journals by Scopus. Other questions, comments?
Thank you, Bogdana, for your question. I think that we can move on the next topic.
So it's about
Plagiarism. And its prevention, yes. Yes, please share with us your screen.
Okay, good. Let me just...
Yes, everything is fine.
Good. Plagiarism detection and prevention. Again, there are several organizations concerned with plagiarism. Some of these organizations are well known, and they consider plagiarism as scientific misconduct, a form of scientific misconduct, along with fabrication and falsification and fabrication. So any instance of plagiarism is punished, particularly intentional plagiarism. Plagiarism is a structured word included in mesh vocabulary, and it was introduced in 1990. So it's passing off as one's own the work of another without proper credit. In simple words, Council of Science Editors has its own approach. They consider plagiarism as a form of privacy, stealing others' figures, images, tables without permission, without acknowledgement. But one of the leading experts in the field of plagiarism, Miguel Roig, considers plagiarism as stealing not just texts and data, but also misappropriation of others' intellectual property, ideas, and methodologies. So stealing ideas usually takes place during the peer review, and it's quite difficult to discern origins of plagiarism of ideas. So we published our own article on plagiarism and divided plagiarism into several forms. In Eastern Europe, the most common type could be translational plagiarism, because authors publish something in their local journals, in local languages, then translate good articles and submit and publish in other journals. So please note that all digitized journals, particularly with Crossref membership, are united, and any such instance can be easily detected throughout at the authenticate check. Plagiarism is a topic well discussed on Scopus, and some journals, particularly Nature, extensively publish articles tagged with this keyword. Some countries like United States, United Kingdom, India, China are top countries with most publications in this field. Unfortunately, the number of articles on plagiarism in Ukraine is low, just 28. So the leading expert with solid profile on Scopus is Miguel Roig. He is an American psychologist, US-based psychologist, but of Cuban origin. And he is a psychologist who first developed URL platform for plagiarism, for sharing knowledge about plagiarism among PhD candidates and other novice authors. Almost 10% of retracted articles are due to plagiarism. We have evidence coming, it's old evidence, however, we still consider it as an important point. So 10% of all medical articles retracted due to various reasons are some 10% are due to plagiarism. Some countries often spotted as leading countries with authors often with most plagiarists. So USA, probably because of plagiarism of ideas. Non-Anglophone countries like Japan, China, you see that large part of this pie is due to plagiarism, due to retractions of Chinese articles. And there is also a large percentage of authors from India who also plagiarize. Most authors from India are Anglophone authors, or their first language is, or first or second language, or their education is based on British English. So they often plagiarize not because of poor knowledge of English, but because of several other reasons, because of inappropriate education, pushing students to memorize, to copy parts from other published sources, and sell off these copied parts as their own intellectual properties. So approaches to Anglophone and non-Anglophone countries in terms of plagiarism should be different. In non-Anglophone countries, in Eastern Europe, authors, novice authors should improve their knowledge of English. They should read more English, good English articles, journals, monographs, and they should try to properly structure their sentences instead of copying already published English sentences. Some of these articles on plagiarism, particularly the last one on retraction, is well publicized. And again, we see that on Twitter, these articles are widely discussed. So Twitter is also considered as an open channel for discussing causes of retractions, causes of plagiarism, and we may use Twitter to detect plagiarism post-publication, because Twitter is used by readers who actively comment on published contents. So there was a story of Croatian articles. You probably know that in 2013, Croatia joined EU, and one of the main requirements for joining EU was to meet EU standards. And one of the scholarly standards was to avoid corruption in science. So plagiarism can be also considered as a corruption in science, as something related to scientific misconduct, and any scientific misconduct, any form of scientific misconduct is also corruption. So, but over the years, the best journals like Croatian Medical Journal retracted articles because of many reasons, and some because of plagiarism, cleaned their journal, and now Croatian Medical Journal is considered as one of the ethical journals. Hopefully, many other European and particularly Eastern European journals will also follow steps of Croatian Medical Journal and become fully English journals without any trace of plagiarism. So here you see some examples how novice Croatian authors apologized for their mistakes, and these authors of course continued their academic career without doing the same mistakes, without copying published parts. So this type of strategy is acceptable. So many Croatian journals are now indexed by Scopus. Some of them are also with high impact factors, and it's quite difficult to publish any article in journals like Croatian Medical Journals and other Croatian journals, because they meet highest possible standards. There are two different reasons of stealing words, stealing texts. These are because of poor academic writing English, and also because of academic laziness, more common in Americas, or academic laziness is a reason of self-recycling or self-plagiarism by academics, busy academics, Anglophone academics. I mentioned about two forms of plagiarism: intentional, which is punishable, and unintentional, less punishable, a form which can be prevented by educating novice or ongoing research, novice authors or ongoing researchers. The best strategy to avoid plagiarism is to improve citation practice, to meet American Psychological Association standards, and to always consider linking scientific evidence, scientific facts with relevant reference. If you see introductions and discussions with just few or handful references, ask authors to revise their manuscripts to link any sentence in their article with relevant reference. Self-plagiarism, or otherwise called recycling, it's another sinister form of plagiarizing when the same authors copy already published texts, their own texts, and think that it's okay. It's not okay because publishing enterprise requires innovative publishing something new, something fresh, without misleading readers, without confusing evidence synthesis, because the same facts, the same points can be in 2 or 3 articles, and evidence synthesis can be confused because of that practice. There are certain limits of copying, so you should remember that any percentage of similarity should be carefully evaluated and avoided. So if you use authenticate, you trace certain parts, ask authors to revise. No, any percentage is acceptable. 0% of similarity is acceptable at the best. There are different strategies to detect plagiarism. The simplest way is Google search. The more complicated, related to commercial software, is Authenticate, powered by commercial Authenticate service, available to Crossref members. So you can also use Google Image when you deal with suspicious figures, tables, graphs, and you can do it as editors. There are different strategies to detect. Best strategies are, of course, consider not just textual similarity, but also keywords in similarities in keywords in different articles. And when the same percentage of keywords is present in one manuscripts comparable to another one, we may suspect redundancy, and we may also consider it as a form of plagiarism, just keywords, not text, not paragraphs, but separate keywords, the same keywords in 2 articles. There are different strategies related to software. Some software are well equipped to find connected articles, again, based on keywords analysis of keywords in 2 different articles. And the best strategy is to employ Authenticate by journals publishing in English. However, I see that in some Eastern European or Eurasian journals, editors claim that they use Authenticate, but most articles are Ukrainian, Russian, or Kazakh. Why then they claim that they use Authenticate? Authenticate is for English articles. So you should use Authenticate if you publish mostly English articles. Here is an example of Kazakhstani journal, promising journal, based on all recent standards, ethical and technical standards, and this journal also employs Authenticate, and most articles, 100% of articles, are in English. so it's understandable. And here are some examples of similarities detected by this Kazakhstani journal. You see, one sentence is copied, but this sentence is detected as similar to a certain source. However, this is just quote enclosed in quotation marks, so it's okay. All other parts of the manuscripts are clean of any similarity. So, and you can see 6% of similarity is just technical percentage, and it means nothing, because when we manually recheck these manuscripts, we can detect only this highlighted sentence. The rest is okay. So we may suggest good journals to use Authenticate, to check it primarily for review articles where most parts contain textual information, most subsections. Good journals like Lancet, like other local journals, they check for plagiarism primarily review articles and do not waste their time and do not automatically check all other original research papers. So it's acceptable to Lancet because most articles submitted to Lancet are free of any textual plagiarism. So it's unlikely that this journal will publish redundant review or redundant original research paper with reused sentences anytime. Here are some examples from local Pakistani journal. So this journal do not use Authenticate software, and they frequently publish students' works. What they do? They simply rely on honesty of their authors and ask them to disclose, to claim that all parts of their manuscript is free of any recycled parts. It's acceptable to some, but of course, it would be better to employ Authenticate software and to check 100% of manuscripts without relying on honesty of authors. Trust, we know that famous proverb, trust but verify. So another good example, Croatian example, one of the best biochemical journal with high impact, they employed or hired research integrity editors. So those journals who apply to Scopus, particularly to Scopus, and I often have that comment to Scopus experts. When I evaluate, I mentioned that it would be better to have research integrity editor responsible for ethical stance of individual articles and the whole journal. So local Eastern European journals may do the same. And here is an example of another good journal, Medical Sciences Proceedings of the Shevchenko Scientific Society, with research integrity editor, responsible for plagiarism checks and other ethical matters. Another local journal that is still struggling with indexing, and this journal still uses Grammarly for similarity checks. Of course, it's okay, but Grammarly is not as advanced as Authenticate, and some manuscripts may be published with similarities, with plagiarism. So editors of this journal, local journals, should be very careful. The same with other journals, those journals that use free similarity check platforms available on internet. The best, of course, Authenticate. And of course, here I am going to discuss one sensitive matter. I recently checked for plagiarism in a Kazakhstani journal and found that this article was already published by Medical Science in Ukraine. So it's a good journal, of course. They published this article from India, in an Indian article. But strangely enough, this article, the same article, was submitted to another journal. And the reason of submitting the same article after acceptance by local Ukrainian journal remains unknown. Why the same authors who published with one journal submit the same article to another journal with the same, almost the same rank? It was detected by me with regular authenticate checks. And regular authenticate check highlighted the whole article and pointed to first item in bibliography. And this item is already published article in a local Ukrainian journal. I also checked ORCID profile of this corresponding author and noticed that the article under consideration was already published in another article journal. So, of course, this second submission, multiple submission, duplicate submission, was rejected by Kazakhstani journal. So my colleagues in Ukraine and Kazakhstan should be very careful when they process submissions from India and other countries, foreign countries, because sometimes duplicate submissions are also possible. You probably know that there is a retraction watch database, and all are more than 10,000 articles, retracted articles are available for searches on this platform. Some of these are tagged due to plagiarism of article, data, image, and text, but not ideas. So we can also use this platform for searches and to map plagiarism structure in certain countries, like in China. You can see that the large number of retracted articles due to plagiarism, more than 400 articles are from China. And also we see that plagiarism of articles overall is also quite extensive. Around 2,000 articles are retracted because of plagiarism in articles. In Ukraine, there is just one retracted article in mathematics because of plagiarism, but most probably there could be many other retracted articles if editors of these journals start using authenticates, start carefully analyzing published contents and rechecking texts, graphs, and asking readers to comment on published contents. Simple rules to avoid plagiarism. It's easy when you know, when your English is well enough to draft articles, when you know how to cite and to properly acknowledge primary sources. There are simple 5 rules to avoid plagiarism. Do not copy word by word. Write everything in your own words. When in doubt that something written in introductions and discussions is not yours, then find relevant reference and cite. Do not recycle graphics. In Indian articles are mostly, we find this type of practice, and ask permission to use graphics instead of violating copyright's principle. And of course, we may also benefit from Miguel Roig's platform on didactic platform on plagiarism, telling us how to improve our writing and how to better express our ideas, better link evidence-based parts in our articles with published contents. Some examples of good articles. So we recently published plagiarism survey, analyzed more than 200 respondents' forms, And this survey, the last survey, was based on previously published review articles. So any survey, online survey, is based on previous review articles, analysis of evidence. So referring to this plagiarism survey, we see that most respondents were from India, Turkey, Kazakhstan, Ukraine, and I'm grateful to all respondents from these countries who are quite active on social media and helped us in the during the pandemic to publish this valuable work. So in response to question, how likely is that plagiarism origins are rooted in education? A large number of respondents pointed that 47% of respondents pointed that education is to blame for plagiarism, particularly in India, where instructors push students to memorize, to reuse their memorized knowledge. Which software is used to detect plagiarism? 42% of respondents refer to Authenticate. So it's excellent platform and should be used widely by journals, particularly those who claim to be ethical journals. And how social media may help to detect and prevent plagiarism. Respondents knew, half of respondents knew that readers may point to traces of plagiarism throughout social media commenting. Well,
thank you, Armand.
Olena, brief comments because we lag behind our program. Brief
Yes,
comments.
but Armand, we have one surprise for our participants. In the morning, we had another one meeting, a very nice meeting with intelligent lady from Japan.
Well,
could you say a few words about this meeting?
Yeah, that was really an excellent meeting, energizing meeting with a lady linguist with good English, proper English, and she is an expert in medical editing. We are going to expand our cooperation with this lady, and hopefully all our participants, Ukrainian Council of Science Editors, would benefit from her knowledge, from her support. So, and I think that we may also invite this lady to attend our face-to-face meetings, a series of our face-to-face meetings. And of course, it's also an option. So can we, shall we stream that presentation?
Yes, we have recorded presentation.
Okay.
Yes, and I will try to do this. One moment, because I have to share my computer sounds.
Okay, be very careful.
I will try to do this, but I cannot see this option. Please, could you say me if everything is okay? Okay, one moment.
Good.
I will try to do this.
It's just for 20 minutes.
Yes.
And I think that after this presentation, we'll have two quick presentations.
You should tell me, can you hear the sound of computer's video? Okay, one moment.
Let's try. Yeah.
One moment. Yes, I can see. One moment. One moment. Share computer sound. Yes. Oh, share sound. I found this option. Okay. Okay. Yes.
So today we are going to talk with Dr. Takako Kojima, who is a medical editor from Tokyo Medical University, Tokyo, Japan. She is an experienced science editor and instructor of English language. And I hope her advice, her presentation today will be instrumental or helpful for our participants, non-Anglophone researchers who need advice from a good expert. Expert with experience of drafting articles, editing these articles, and also helping colleagues to polish their English and publish good articles with understandable and readable English. So, Takako, please share, you can share your screen with us. And please introduce shortly what you do and how you are going to edit articles. You can share screen.
I can share my screen, but I'm not sure how to.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, everything is.
Do it again.
Yes.
No worries. Do it again.
Hold on. Yeah, this is a problem because for some reason you cannot see me when you see the screen, right?
You did it a few seconds ago. Yes.
Try it again. The same way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you see?
Yes.
We can see it now.
From
the beginning.
Start from beginning.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you see me?
Yes, we should see your profile and your slides.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I don't have a profile slide. Okay.
Just from the beginning, full screen, please.
Full screen,
full
yes.
Screen.
And click on the beginning. From the beginning.
As a slideshow, yes, from the beginning.
Yeah.
Is this okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
No.
Yeah. Good.
Can you?
Yeah.
Is this okay?
Yes. Thank you.
All right. Okay. So thank you very much for having me. My name is Takako Kojima. I work at Tokyo Medical University, and my slides are not very formally made, so this is just going to be a very brief introduction. But the department that I work in, we not only specialize in medical editing, but we also specialize in teaching medical English as well. So I'm just going to share with you what we do and where the medical editing actually fits in. So I actually edit for the Tokyo Medical University Journal, which is our university journal, and also some other medical journals for Japanese medical societies. And my colleague does medical editing for people within the university. So these are individual researchers who actually want to have their papers edited by us. One of the things we're actually seeing over the past maybe 10 years or so is that many Japanese researchers turn to private companies for medical editing. And some of the problems that we are getting now, which we never had before, is that when these researchers send out their papers to companies for editing, they have some problems with communication. So a lot of the times, the English is not exactly what they wanted to say in their native language, which is Japanese. And they basically have to bring it back to us to discuss. So discussing with the author is also a very big, is one thing that we actually put a lot of emphasis on. So this is basically what we do for the medical editing. This is just to introduce you to our university and the facility. So it's a very big medical university with a university hospital. We actually have 3 university affiliated hospitals. And so everybody who works in the university and the hospitals, all hospitals are entitled to, they can send us papers if they need to be edited. Okay, so for me, I've been, before I started working at Tokyo Medical University, which is close to 25 years ago, I had no idea what medical editing was. I had an excellent mentor who really trained me in medical editing. And so personally, my idea of what the editor's role, the English editor's role is to help authors publish something worthy, because I think that's what editors look for. They want to look for papers that are basically worth publishing. And to do that, the manuscript itself has to be readable. It has to be written very clearly, and it has to be understandable for all readers. And what that actually means is basically in the paper, everything has to be clearly written. So for the introduction section, for example, what is the research question, right? It has to be made very clear what the research is about, what the paper is about. In the methods section, why are you using those methods? In the results, what the main findings were, basically, very clearly put. And in the discussion section, what your paper, what your research set out to do. So basically, trying to let the reader know what the research was basically about and what the limitations were. So all this has to be made very clear. And basically, to make a manuscript readable, of course, you need the research, right? You need something that is worth publishing. But also, I think, especially for non-native English speakers, some of the stuff I have put up here on this slide is probably what English editors have to correct. So grammar, punctuation, spelling, of course, but the sentence structure, of course, is very difficult, especially for Japanese researchers, which I edit papers for, because the structure itself, it differs greatly from English. So I think for some people who are, for people who speak a different native language, that's always going to be a problem. And also for correct word usage, we use a lot of the AMA Manual of Style for correct usage. And I find this very interesting because I just recently bought the latest version, and I found out that a lot of the stuff that we used to correct in the past is now acceptable, which for me was a big shock. Whoops, sorry about that. And so the AMA Manual of Style, I use a lot for checking correct word usage. Also correct editorial style as well. I mean, a lot of the journals do have their own instructions to authors, and a lot of non-native researchers don't like to read through pages of instructions to authors, mainly because it's difficult to understand and they don't have a lot of time. Also publication policies. So I'm talking about ethical issues here. I'm just going to move to my next slide just to show that there's a considerable difference in language and culture that I come across as an editor. For example, as I mentioned before, a paper has to be clearly written, but in Japanese, it's very common to have a very long introduction and finally at the end to talk about what the research is about or what you wanted to do, what the main objective of that research was. Whereas in English, you would put this at the very beginning. So I think that's that's sort of a language cultural difference that I usually have to pay attention to. Also for the discussion section as well, Japanese researchers tend to write a long introduction to a discussion, which is almost like reading another introduction, which has to be corrected, of course. So for the discussion sections, usually I end up having to put, what the goal of that research was at the very beginning. And so this is something that I see all the time, which I think is really affected by the way that culture is. Japanese culture is very, very, you don't really want to be too direct. So everything is very vague, and it shows when you start writing in English. Whoops, sorry. Okay, sorry about that. So a lot of the problems that I see are also listed here. Sometimes I see direct translations of how, I can tell what that researcher really wanted to say in Japanese, but it just doesn't make sense in English. So that's one problem. And again, sentence structure. So in English, we have a subject. We always have a subject, but in Japanese, it's very common not to have a subject and know what you're talking about. So that makes things a bit difficult as well. Verb tenses is also difficult because in the English language, you have certain tenses that we don't even have in Japanese. So a lot of the common mistakes that I find among the papers that I edit here are can probably fall under these categories. And also the understanding of ethical responsibilities is very, very low. The level of understanding is quite low in Japan. It's getting much better, I think, but still it hasn't reached the level where it's internationally acceptable, I think. This is personally speaking. But so a lot of the times I need to check with the authors about the content over and over. Even if I check with the authors, I then double check. So checking with the author becomes a very, very important part of the editing that we do at the university. I talked about the AMA Manual of Style, of course. I'm sure a lot of editors are familiar with this, but it's not just for us, the editors, but also for the authors to educate themselves as well. So every chance I get, I try to introduce, either the researcher or that department to books like this or guidelines like this. And also I introduce them to the ICMJ recommendations for author responsibilities, just so that they know what the basic responsibilities are for an author and to familiarize them with that kind of knowledge. And also code flowcharts, because it's been translated into Japanese. I worked on the translations in Japanese many, many years ago as well. But so these are available. So just to let authors know that, people are really watching and it's very dangerous to publish something that, could be considered misconduct. This is my last slide actually, but I just wanted to show you that in the department that I work in, we do medical editing, but we also try to educate our students and graduate students before they actually start writing. And I think this is very important because, we edit papers if we edit papers for the same researcher, sometimes you can tell that basically they're not really paying attention to what you've edited for them. They just want to get the paper, submit it and forget about it. And that doesn't really help because, in the long run, you want people to be able to write well and also learn from it. I think that's very important. And you also want researchers to be responsible for their work as well. So in the undergraduate school, we teach EMP, which is English for Medical Purposes. And we also have international exchange. But if I have a chance to introduce students the undergraduate students to medical articles, I will, and I will also teach them very basic medical writing skills. And then in the graduate school, where we actually have lectures on medical writing and publication ethics, my colleague and I, we actually give lectures on how to write. We also show them some of the common mistakes that we find from our medical editing, so that at least, you know, they know that it's very different from regular literature or the English that they've known studying in high school, or so it's very different. And I think just letting them know that there are what we call international standards for medical writing, such as, you know, the AMA Manual of Style, or the standards, the international standards for publication ethics or responsibilities as an author, that really, I think, will benefit them. And also in the future, it will improve the overall quality of the papers that we end up editing. So this is very brief, but this is what I have from my end so far. So anything that you'd like me to add, I'd be very happy to do that. Let me just, am I back?
Yep.
Yes?
Yep.
Okay.
Perfect. So
Oh,
Takako, thank you very
Yes.
much for short and aimful presentation. So you've covered some interesting areas. I think you, as an expert in English and in medical editing, you are a precious asset for numerous journals. I know that you published in some good journals like Chest, and you are interested in publication ethics, and it's great that you translated COP flowcharts. So these are algorithms used widely across medical journals and not just, and non-medical journals as well. So your experience is valuable, and we as editors, I personally, as an expert review of Scopus journal applications, I think that your experience is quite valuable, and journal editors, chief editors should hire experts like you as language editor. And taking this opportunity, I thank you for your cooperation with some Eastern European journals. And I think that our cooperation will be expanded in Eastern Europe, and we'll have international cooperation as well. So you mentioned about editing, commercial editing services. These are widely used in Asia Pacific in an ethical way, because most commercial editing services are either members of COP or adhere to ethical principles of editing and cooperating with authors. So what's your opinion on having the same commercial editing services in Eastern Europe, where these services are either non-existent or editing commercial editors act in an unethical way? So your opinion, your advice.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Armand, for your very kind words. I really appreciate it. And I really don't think I'm at that standard, but I appreciate it anyway. So thank you very much. It's interesting you say that in Eastern Europe, you don't have that many commercial editing services. And because that's the opposite of what I've been seeing in Japan. We have so many of these commercial editing companies that it's very difficult for researchers to actually distinguish between which companies are good or bad or ethical, right? So that's one thing that we have actually added to what we teach. It's very difficult to say, please don't use it, because a lot of the departments, the clinical departments, have funding available for researchers, and they actually have to use that funding for medical English editing. And if they don't use it, they have to return it. So they you know, why not, right? They have to use it. So one attractive point about these companies is that they edit very, very quickly. So if a researcher doesn't have enough time and they don't really care too much about the quality of the editing, they will send out the papers to companies, and you know, it will come back in a day or two if you want the express service. But one problem that everybody talks to me, well, tells me, is that if they need something to be re-edited, it goes to a different editor. So you don't communicate with the same editor throughout the process, which makes it very difficult, of course, as you can imagine, because if you have different people editing your paper each time, and not everybody is an expert in that field, then I've seen some terrible edited papers. I've seen really poorly edited papers. I've seen very good editing as well, but it really depends on the company, what kind of people they've hired, and who turned out to edit that paper at that time. So basically it's luck, right? And it's not very stable. So if you were to have commercial companies in Eastern Europe, I think it wouldn't be a bad choice, especially if, you know, you want more papers to be published, or if you want to promote more medical, you know, writing among researchers. I think it would actually benefit the researchers, but it would be good to have a system where, you know, if you want your paper edited, it will be edited by the same editor throughout the editing process or through to submission, because that tends to be one of the big problems among the commercial companies in Japan. Also, the cost is it's quite high for editing. I don't have the price list here, but I mean, depending on the company. And if you want it edited very quickly, of course, they charge you even more. They know that the clinical departments pay for them. They know about the funding and the budget. So they're not scared to charge for a very high cost. So I think if you have some kind of, a standard price for editing for a commercial company, I think it would work. A lot of the companies, you know, some of them don't really show how much they charge. They tell you that they will send you an estimate. But so who knows how much, but I do know that it's quite costly. I hear from other university professors, you know, we've had to pay this amount of money to get this edited, and it's not even that great. So I think having that kind of company is not bad. It's just that the quality has to be managed. And I think, that's the problem between the academia and the sort of market, right? It's so different and there's no interaction. So, in the end, like in our case, a lot of the doctors and researchers, they sent out their papers. Most of the time, I think it's okay for them. Whether or not it gets accepted or whether it by the journal of their choice, I don't know. But for re-editing, definitely it goes to somebody else. For response to reviewers, it's another charge, of course. And most of the time, like for interactions between the editorial office and the researcher, they don't really take care of that. So they actually have to come to us for help in some kind of area. And the worst is if they've spent a lot of money for the editing, but they feel it's not exactly what they wanted to say, and they can't really quite put their finger on what it is, but they know that it's not exactly what they intended to say. And if you check, I've handled papers like that many times too, but most of the time, yeah, it doesn't make sense, so yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great.
What is your opinion about Grammarly or for writing aid? Is it helpful? for English editing.
Takako, there are many software
Yes.
and
Oh,
not just
Grammarly.
experts.
I mean, Grammarly for writing aid.
you mean there's software for grammar?
Yeah, because Eastern European authors often rely on software, which is inexpensive, and they can correct, edit
Yes.
without asking someone else.
Ah, okay. So is this different from like translation software?
Yeah, it's
It's
more
different.
advanced, yeah. And I see. So you rely on your own expertise, on your writing and editing skills without relying on software. That's great. Yeah.
Okay, that's because I don't have the software.
I got your point. Yeah.
In Europe, the most popular software named Grammarly.
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 Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, but there are many
Yes.
other software. So
Okay.
Eastern European fellows, those with good English, good writing English, they often just edit with software and submit to journals. But I know that in Asia Pacific, in Japan, South Korea, authors often refer their manuscripts to professional commercial editing experts. They edit, and then they the authors submit to good top journals like even Nature, Science, Cell. So this type of journals, even I'm not sure, but Nobel Prize winners from Asia Pacific, they also rely on support of language experts or author editors, like probably you are also author editor. So yeah, strategies are different across all over the world. So you have your own vision, your own attitude towards editing. But the good point is that experts like you, editors with interest in publication ethics, may produce more ethical products compared to those who are just linguists, and they translate, edit, and without understanding publication ethics, without understanding principles of authorship and contributorship. So it's great, yeah. And
thank you. Yeah, I just want to add that, like you say, even in Japan, in Japanese medical universities, most of the medical English, the teachers who teach English or medical English, they're not very, I would say they're not very interested in editing or publication ethics. And that's the problem. It's we are very unique. So we are actually the only university, probably, we have 80 medical universities in Japan, but we're the only one who has their own in-house editing, which makes us very unique. But at the same time, as I've said, because we're the only ones, that's why a lot of people rely on commercial companies. And it's becoming very dangerous because, you know, some researchers actually use translation software, which is terrible. But also they actually submit, they send their papers to get translated before it's actually edited, which is a double process, but it's also very, I think it's risky because, you know, when you send these papers out for translation, the translator is not a medical translator. So they're not very familiar with medical writing. So it turns out to be a sort of mixture of medical writing and literature, well, you know, regular essay writing. And that makes it very difficult to, even more harder to edit, if you know what I mean. So you can tell
you are talking about substantive editing. Yeah.
Yes.
I got it. Yeah.
Yes. And I think, you know, for a typical Japanese researcher, they might not know the difference, but for someone like myself or my colleague, we can, you know, you can tell straight away if some paper has been translated it terribly, or, you know, the level is just not satisfactory. And then you can tell if it's been edited by somebody who was actually familiar with medical writing or not. So, you know, the quality is just, it's very unstable. And there's no way of knowing for the researcher, you know, whether they made the right choice or not. And that's becoming sort of the biggest problem here. Yeah, and I'm very interested in, well, actually, I was very surprised to learn how this is actually happening in Japan and Asia, right? Not in Eastern Europe. So for me, it's all new, you know, because I just thought maybe the commercial editing is all over the world, but I guess not. Even I'm finding this out now from you. Yeah.
Yeah, in the globalized world, so all authors, either in Eastern Europe or Asia Pacific, they rely on the same commercialized and globalized editing services. I am not going to name these commercial services because most authors know and often refer to these services when they plan to submit an article, manuscript to a good journal, like top rheumatology journal or top general medical journal. They need support of professional editors. Of course, they also need substantive editing, structuring and presenting their manuscripts in a logical way, in a flow of all parts. So today we are going to discuss with our participants, webinar participants, how to improve quality of English. And I think your presentation, your advice is quite important for us. And I recall my experience with Kazakhstani fellows who visited your department on numerous occasions, and thank you for that as well. I hope that after the pandemic, we'll resume our visitings for Kazakhstani, and not just Kazakhstani, but also for Eastern European fellows.
Yes.
And this type of cooperation is important to learn more from you, from experience of faculty at your university, and also share problems encountered by Eastern European, Central Asian fellows. So I hope that we'll continue our cooperation, and you will have more opportunities and more time to invest in our research fellows. Thank you, Takako.
Thank you very much for having me. And yes, I really look forward to future collaborations with you.
Yeah, well, it was a wonderful encounter with Takako Kojima, medical editor, English instructor, and our good friend who supported some of our Kazakhstani fellows. So, Olena, shall we continue?
Yes, let's move on to your lecture on English writing. Yes.
Yeah. So they forgot. Can see my screen?
Yes, yes. Yes. Yes, we can see your full screen.
Well, another piece of advice by another expert in English, this time from Eastern Europe, from Lviv. Tatiana Yakhantova is another great expert who published a handbook on editing, and this handbook is freely available. So we had a chance of listening Tatiana Yakhantova on several occasions, and her lectures on English scientific English were also quite helpful. So she advises to use correct spelling, correct grammar, and punctuation. So Takako Kojima briefly referred to the same points and presented her own style of editing, which is not much different, not so different compared to Tatiana Yakhantova's approach, but she mentioned about cultural, Takako Kojima mentioned about cultural differences. So we should take into account education of our authors and publication ethical principles, because let's say in China, authors may simply copy large chunks of texts from other published sources and consider it normal, this type of writing practices. The same may be acceptable in some Indian contexts where medical students are trained to memorize large texts and reproduce large texts for their presentations, for writing articles. So we should be very careful with cultural concepts as well. So, and for good writing, authors should consider a number of points presented by Tatiana Yakhantova. I am not going to discuss all these 10 points. Those who need advice, language advice, may go and read entire English academic writing handbook. So our researchers may find a lot of useful information on language editing in specialized journals. And I should say that there are only 2 linguistic journals from Ukraine currently related to philology. More efforts is required to invest in local linguistic journals and to help authors improve their English with support of experts like Tatiana Yakhantova and Takako Kojima. One of my good friends and collaborators from this time from South Korea, he also published a set of recommendations about proper writing, and he mentioned about consistency and logical flow in an article, in a manuscript, as the main requirement for good writing, starting from a paragraph. And he also mentioned about connecting words, words connecting different sentences. In medicine, we usually write short sentences, and we may join 2 sentences using these connecting words or keywords, but with caution, because we have to structure short sentences in medical texts. Some golden rules presented by me are is to write short sentences, always consider order of words, which is different in English and in Slavic languages. Avoid mixing British and American styles in a single manuscript. So it may arise suspicions of plagiarism if you mix different styles. So in terms of punctuation, the main mistake is when authors do not use so-called Oxford comma. When they present more than 2 examples, the third example in a sentence should be preceded by an Oxford comma, so-called Oxford comma. And of course, logical parts within one manuscript, within one section, paragraph should be linked again with keywords. So logical flow is the essence of good article. Here is an example of not so good article, suggesting it's a Ukrainian article in a relatively good journal, medicine perspective. However, this journal, linguists may pick mistakes in translation. It's a mechanical translation from Ukrainian without paying attention to substantive editing. There is also another mistake when multiple examples of the same scientific fact is presented, and Tatiana Yakhantova always tells her students to avoid this type of practice. Many Slavic or Eastern European fellows incorrectly use article a, an, and indefinite and definite articles. So we should remember that indefinite articles a and an are mostly for countable nouns in a singular form, one of something, and rarely used with uncountable nouns, like a feature, a quality of something. So we may omit most of the time. We don't need indefinite articles for uncountable nouns, like money. We don't say a money. We may use definite article the. So the article can be used for singular and plural nouns known to the reader mentioned earlier in the text. So when a noun first mentioned, it's usually with indefinite article an apple, or an apple. But when the next sentence again discusses the same noun, we should use definite article the. So it's often a mistake of non-Anglophone authors. Here are some examples of correct use of definite article. Let's say the GP, general practitioner, examined a patient yesterday, indefinite article a. The patient, the same patient, had undergone numerous procedures. He can be referred to a hospital specialist. So a play with definite and indefinite articles. Another example, taking an ethical stance means here is quality, an ethical stance, a rare occasion of using indefinite article. Taking an ethical stance means using our personal and professional core values, experiences, and after Oxford comma goes backgrounds. And pay also attention to forms, plural forms of using nouns or word or phrases. Core values, experiences, backgrounds. Another example of correct or difficult case of using the or omitting article the. Life is happiness per se, where we deal with general concept, we omit article the. However, when we deal with specific concept, the life of some species is endangered. So here is the article should be placed. The Kolmogorov-Smirnov test. When we deal with names of statistical tests, by famous researchers, we use article the. However, when we refer to the same test in a possessive manner, Kolmogorov-Smirnov's test, we omit this article the. The same refers to Spearman-Rank correlation. We may also use definite article the for organs, for superlative words, the best, or other words, or principal figures like the principal, the school master, the editor-in-chief. In all these cases, we use the definite article the. The is also used with the moon, the sun, the Mediterranean Sea, the Scopus database, but Scopus is just a database. So you see, pay attention to this difference. Proper use of tenses and voices. In medicine, we have to use simple tenses most of the time and avoid using passive voices. The patient was treated. Yeah, it's a passive voice. We may change it with active voice. The doctor treated a patient. There is a slight difference. So I'll present some examples in a bit. So active voice is preferable, and your editors should also, when they edit manuscripts for your journals, for your departments, try to change passive voices, modify passive voices to active voice sentences, and avoid playing with times, particularly with perfect tenses. We often use perfect tense just once in a paragraph and then continue with simple present or simple past tense. Here is an example of overly using passive voices, which was also mentioned by Professor Tatiana Yakhantova. So non-native or non-Anglophone researchers tend to use passive voices. And it's the main task of editors to correct this type of writing. You see, in conclusion, we often use simple present tense because it's general section for generalizing concepts. However, another example of a mistaken editing in a good journal, it could be further edited further by language editor. So the journal may hire a good language editor to increase readability and their manuscripts by Anglophone readers. So using past tense in conclusion or discussing results in detail, not so good. And this principle is also discussed by most linguists like Tatiana Yakhantova, Takako Kojima, and others. Another mistake, in conclusion, the author overly used perfect tense, whereas conclusion is just for simple present tense. Avoid using phrases like "it has been shown," "it has been proven," and you will understand a bit later when I discuss presentations from Europe. So each part section of article should have its own principles of writing. Let's say in introduction and discussion, main parts of manuscripts, there is difference in uses of tenses. Let's say we may use present perfect tense in introduction, but in discussion we often use simple present tense. Again, it relates to general concepts. We should cut redundant phrases, and this principle is also important for non-Anglophone, Slavic, or Eastern European authors. Redundant phrases like "it's worth noting," "it has been shown that," "it is well known," "to the best of our knowledge," all these redundant phrases should be cut. The same refers to redundant words. There are numerous redundant words. Avoid using "very" or "too." Quite helpful. Avoid using words which are normal in our spoken English but sound bizarre in written English. Avoid structuring verbose sentences. Try to write short sentences. It is also based on recommendations of linguists. Try to play with synonyms and use these synonyms to make your text richer, to increase richness of your text. Instead of using nice, use enjoyable, pleasant, delightful, satisfying. Like today we had satisfying and enjoyable conversation with Takako Kojima. It was quite pleasant to all of us and hopefully to our participants. So her recommendations are acceptable, and we also recommend others to stick to recommendations of Takako Kojima and Tatiana Yahanto. Quite a lot of problems arise with adjectives. When to use few or handful, a little or scarce. The same with much and many. So accounts for adjectives for counts also quite important. Compound adjectives. These concepts not so familiar to most non-Anglophone authors. Let's say a highly cited paper, a well-known, a 20-year-old. 3 words are united with dashes. So compound adjectives are also quite difficult to understand by non-Anglophone authors. There are also compound subjects. Again, something related to adjectives, compound adjectives and compound nouns or subjects. An example, subject and verb agreement. So we should also structure our English sentences and offer order. The doctor and nurse are on duty today. This structure cannot be strange. It's a rigid structure without any changes. So subject should be placed first and verb second. Is, are. During and while. During is a preposition. During often used with the preposition and noun, while is used with conjunction and subject plus verb or gerund form. So here is an example. Students were active during the lecture. It's a period of time. We cannot use students were active while the lecture. Here, this it's easy to understand. However, the next example, students were active while taking part in the lecture. So again, here we can use only while and not during. So practicing with during and while may help to avoid simple mistakes with during and while. Among and between. When we use between, it means we compare 2 subjects. Among means more than 2 subjects. So properly use among and between. Which and that. Which is used in non-defining clauses. That is used in defining clauses. Something is known. And we will discuss these examples. So bibliographic databases, which are frequently listed in search strategies of reviews, non-defining clause. So we should use which. Scopus, that is the largest database. Pay attention to absence of commas. It means that this clause is defining. That is used with defining. So try to learn how to use which and that and avoid mistakes. Who, that, and which. Who is usually used with subjects, with people, with patients. That may be used with subjects, with people, with things. Whereas which is mostly or exclusively used with things, not people. because, since, as, and since, so long discussion about these connecting words. So for advanced learners, this is quite clear, but beginners and intermediate English learners have always struggled with these connecting words. Here are examples. Because it was penetrating the stomach wall, gastric juice was all around. Because of the noun, because of the penetration through the wall, you see some examples when to use because, when to use because of. And it depends also whether the clause relate to reasoning, also important. Because can be also used as a replacement for redundant phrases. Because can be used instead of, due to the fact that, owing to the fact that, in view of the fact that, etc., just to cut redundant phrases. And we can also use additional connectors, like advanced learners, seasoned authors always use furthermore, because of, likewise, etc., etc. These connectors, absence of these connectors suggests that author of the text was novice author, and editing would improve writing. Another aspect is parallelism. When within one sentence and between several sentences, you use different terms, be very careful. You should always consider parallel or the same structure, the same tenses, the same voices. Examples are here: practicing, competing to win. It's a wrong mistake. It should read like practicing, competing, and winning. Students prefer networking, entertaining, and to have fun. Of course, editors should edit the final part. Students prefer networking, entertaining, and having fun, not to have fun, etc., etc. So these are just some examples of editing we use in our medical texts. So hopefully you will also deepen, learn more about principles of using these common forms, common verbs, words, phrases, replacing some words with synonyms to enrich your medical text. So, Olena?
Yes. Thank you, Armand, for valuable information. I think that your advice will improve our participants' English writings, academic English writing skills. And I think that we should move on the final presentation of today's meeting. Armand, yes.
Okay, good. So I'm going to discuss designing some essential parts of original, not just original, all types of articles. So tables, these are mandatory for original research papers. So we should pay attention to drawing columns and rows. When there is just one merged column, it's not table, it's a box. It's having just one or two or handful rows, not good for drawing tables. So you will see some bad examples a bit later. Too long tables, particularly in systematic reviews, also are a bit bizarre. and can be edited, can be divided into several tables. First column in medical research tables, usually for describing units. Without units in laboratory medicine articles, it's difficult to publish articles. And table titles should be standalone, concise, and informative. Vague titles of tables are also irrational, so pay attention to titles. Footnotes are for abbreviations, and avoid duplicating information in tables. Recapitulation of information presented in tables. Here is an example of bad table or poorly edited table full of textual information. Tables are for mixture of text, mixed figures, numbers, but not entirely for text. Other examples, you see title of this table is vague. It's unclear what type of study population, which disease activity. So there is no abbreviation bar to explain abbreviation. So this table cannot stand alone. The same for the second table, table 3. Here you see just one row with figures. So this table could be simply presented as a textual in the form of textual information, but not table. And when we see tables like this without explanation, so difficult to understand, again, it's bizarre and can be edited, can be changed. So other examples from Ukrainian journals, you can see here that good journals, good Ukrainian journals also have some mistakes, and these mistakes relates to the lack of explaining which units were used, or presenting just absolute numbers in tables without percentages. It's also not good. In tables, absolute numbers should stand next to percentages. And here is an example of bad table with just one row with figures. So try to avoid this type of tables, edit these tables. Radiology images, we frequently deal with images in medical articles, and in these articles, certain standards should be observed. White and black matters. So here is an example of a good journal, but with poor editing of arrows. These black arrows are presented on a background or on dark background. Simply, all editors could ask to change black color to white color. Here is good example because arrows are white and it's clearly understandable and clearly visible. Photographs, we use photographs. These mostly relate to ethical issues. We should blind eyes. If we unblind eyes of patients, we should obtain permission. And if we use within one article several photographs, we should use the same design. Images and videos, again, there are certain standards, particularly for journals, considering applying to Medline and PubMed Central Archiving. So more and more journals publish video articles or video supplementary materials. For these videos, MP4 and AV standards formats are acceptable. You see that even top scientific journals use MP4 for video supplementary materials like New England Journal of Medicine. Journals publishing graphs, figures often need image banks, and authors may also use freely available some image banks for colorful, attractive figures. Graphs should be drawn by authors themselves. They can use SurveyMonkey for online survey reporting, SPSS for statistical data reporting, and this type of software are commonly used. Here is an example of statistical paper, simple but clearly understandable. You see distribution of parameter and bell-shaped distribution of these parameters. An example of using SurveyMonkey for reporting in an online survey report by Dr. Latika Gupta, our co-author and collaborator. An example of simple graph in an article analyzing bibliometric data, and an example, good example of journal where case report contains several images, X-ray film, photographs telling about displaying story. So if you use different images, these images should be somehow interconnected and tell story. If there is no story, if reader cannot understand just by paying attention to these images, so it means that there is something, essentially something wrong with these images. So over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Gasparian, and we invite our participants to make comments and ask questions. Please, one moment. We cannot hear you because
Professor
you
Konstantinovich,
yes, Professor Konstantinovich, we cannot hear you because yes,
I just want to, I'm just starting. Professor Gasparian, Olena, dear Armand, thank you very much for your brilliant presentations. This was really a package of loaded with an essential and relevant guidance how to write, and I reckon this would be very, very helpful, particularly for the newcomers, for the beginners in the area, and for those who would like to really start with a very reliable skills. What I mean, if we start with a good quality, then we could just achieve more and more valuable results. What I mean is just track record, etc., and so on. So thank you, Armand. And the Japanese surprise was really impressive, and I believe we could all benefit from this ABC of medical writing. And believe me, I was impressed. I afforded to follow the whole seminar, and what we've heard and what we've seen on your slideshows is relevant, important information, and was a kind of a compact course, practical course, essentials of medical writing. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a million, Professor Konstantinovich. I know that you have some PhD fellows who need this type of advice to draft great articles and target top journals in your field, pediatric rheumatology and just general rheumatology. And hopefully they will also write English articles without support, external support of language editors. But experts like Takako Kojima can instruct our fellows, can share her experience. And you see that she works for a university. She is not commercial agent. She works for a university where thousands of authors refer to her services. The same service can be made available in Eastern European, Central and Eastern European universities to avoid referring to commercial editing services. some of these services in Europe, Central and Eastern Europe, are considered as unethical agencies, and their manuscripts contain unethical writings. So we should be very careful and consider COP standards as well. Thank you very much, Jurek.
Thank you, Jurek. Thank you, Armand. And we have one more question from our regular participant, from Neslihan Goksen. Thank you for your great presentation. I may have missed, which books do you recommend for medical writing? Which books? Armand, we cannot hear you. Yes.
Thank you very much, Neslihan Gokchen. Your point refers to something which is out of my expertise. I cannot recommend any medical writing book. There are some handbooks, like handbook by Tatiana Yakhantova, but all these handbooks are for authors with intermediate or advanced knowledge of academic English. So you may increase, or any author may improve writing by reading more articles in journals like Lancet. Lancet has many language editors editing thousands of articles. So if you read their articles, you understand how language editors acted as wordsmiths. They work on each separate words. So if you read articles in good journals, you improve your writing skills as well. However, you may also use Grammarly. When you write something, you may rely on Grammarly software. That software rectifies your sentences, suggests some synonyms, or simplifies sentences, cut redundant phrases mentioned by me. Takako Kojima today mentioned that some author editors return translations or their edits within 1-2 days. It's because they use some software. However, those who do not use software may simply avoid that and may simply read more and more good quality articles in top journals.
Thank you. Thank you to all our participants from different countries. We hope that knowledge gained during today's meeting will transform into advanced academic activities and help you to produce really influential articles and target the best medical journals. Armand, would you like to say something at the end of our meeting before we finish?
So I'm grateful to all our participants. Today we have international webinar, truly international webinar, because of support and participation of colleagues from Turkey, numerous participants from Turkey. Thank you. From Bulgaria, Croatia, Romania, Russia, and of course, Ukraine. I wish we would have more participants from Ukraine, particularly journal editors who struggle with indexing their journals with Scopus. So we are planning to work more with journals, Eastern European journals, and within the frames of Ukrainian Council of Science Editors, increase standards of Eastern European journals and help them publish more in English. So for that, my advice to journals like Ukrainian Biochemical Journal or other journals, even index journals, to hire language editor, to avoid publishing translated articles where structure of English sentences points to direct translation without substantive editing, without paying attention to rules of English or medical writing. Today we discussed this point with Takako Kojima, and I am grateful to her for her advice. Hopefully we will have more and more webinars devoted to language editing, English language editing, and more participants from Ukraine editors will join us, will learn how to edit English texts. Thank you to all our participants. And Olena, I hope you will express gratitude to organizers of today's meeting.
Armand, we are really grateful to you for your support and we wish you stay healthy and please prepare for us new presentations for the next webinar.
Okay, thank you very much to Danilo Halitsky, Lviv National University. Thank you to Sumy participant, Professor Alexander Smyan from Sumy University in Ukraine. Also, my gratitude, big thank you goes to Ukrainian Council of Science Editor and President, Professor Stoika. We are also grateful to Shevchenko Scientific Society and Professor Oksana Zaitchkivska, who also has supported a lot, shared a good word about all webinar series, our webinar series, and published a lot about our webinars in proceedings of Shevchenko Scientific Society. So, and we also going to plan and run new webinar editions, hopefully discussing language editing, statistics, and other points related to medical writing. We have some participants from Kazakhstan. I value high their support. I understand that they are now in a stressful situation because of known events a few weeks ago. Hopefully they overcome that stress, and will concentrate more on PhD dissertations, will attend more our webinar series. Thank you, Dr. Ainur Kumar. Thank you, Dana Bekarisova, Akerke, Atanuasova, and also fellows from other countries. Olena, any points, any comments from our participants, from our senior fellows? We missed comments from Professor Vasil Donchina. Is it because he missed our...
Yes.
I see. Okay.
Well, have a nice evening. Stay healthy,
Okay.
and see you on the next webinar.
Okay, thank you. Take care.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.